I went from being a vegan chef in Los Angeles to a cattle rancher in Texas. How does that happen? She tried to make us cookies one time and the margarine turned to a plate of plastic in the oven. So I always say I was raised vegan with a lot of butter. She just decided that margarine was not food. There is no vegan food. All of your organic vegetables are grown with dead animals. And the truth is I stayed vegan for money, if we're going to be really honest. So I started taking liver and fish oil with my pregnancies because I was like, what if my ideology is wrong? I'm f***ing up my kid's brain, right? I set out to prove that I could I could have a farm where no animals ever died except for of old age. But I thought I could do it without death and suffering. And I realized that nature is death and suffering all the time.
Welcome. I've got Mollie Engelhart, who, again, formerly a vegan chef, now apparently a cattle rancher in Texas, which is quite a transition for sure. Why don't we start with, how did you get into the vegan chef business? What drove you there?
My mom read a book at 19 about industrial agriculture and decided she didn't want to eat meat. And she was young and raised me like we had a farm and we raised all our own produce, and she worked at a bakery and she was very committed to whole foods, but we didn't eat dairy or meat. And then she tried to make us cookies one time and the margarine turned to a plate of plastic in the oven. So I always say I was raised vegan with a lot of butter because my mom, we didn't eat any meat, but she just decided that margarine was not food. And I was raised in that vegetarian vegan thing. And when my dad and Woody Harrelson are friends, and when they were in their raw food phase, I started making raw ice cream out of nuts for my dad and Woody. And then I ended up with a raw vegan ice cream shop, realized that was a little too narrow of a market. And so I expanded it into a vegan restaurant. I was always really good at cooking and I needed to get out of the marijuana business. And so that's what I did. I started a vegan restaurant in Los Angeles, which expanded into 4 locations and very successful over the last 13 years until the pandemic.
Okay. And were you eating eggs as a kid too, just out of curiosity? Were eggs on the menu or no?
No. A little bit of fermented dairy in our high school years. She introduced yogurt and we didn't have access to raw milk, and she thought that pasteurized milk was not good, and we lived in Ithaca, New York, and we just didn't have access to raw milk. So she did fermented yogurt. My girlfriend growing up, my best friend in high school, owned a dairy company called Brown Cow Yogurt, and so we introduced yogurt in my high school years, I think. And then in college, I was a vegetarian and went back to veganism after got indoctrinated with some video about gonna die of cancer or whatever.
So is your mom still around doing the sort of veganish vegetarian diet?
My mom's still a vegetarian and she lives in Maui, which if you're going to be a vegetarian on a whole food diet, I would say living close to the equator where you have food year round would be a good option. So and then my father is a dairy farmer in Idaho. He has a raw dairy Mountain Cloud Creamery in Idaho. And he also owns Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre, which are huge famous vegan restaurants as well. Around the same time that I opened Sage in Los Angeles, he opened Cafe Gratitude in Los Angeles.
Oh, so your father owns it, but he's a dairy farmer. So that's a conflict.
He went through the same realizations and transitions that I did, but they didn't change their restaurant. But he got a farm to grow food we both did the same thing, grow food for the restaurant, got into growing food and realized there is no vegan food. All of your organic vegetables are grown with dead animals. And so to bring in outside inputs doesn't make sense. The best way is to have on-farm inputs for anything that you're growing and having a diversity of things at the farm. So if you want to grow vegetables, you should have some cows so that you know what those cows are eating. So you know what you're putting on your vegetables. You can use non-organic chicken poop, non-organic cow blood, bone meal, feather meal on organic vegetables. And so you don't know what is going on to your organic vegetables.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. As someone who tried to produce it, it was permanent. I interviewed Leah Keats a few years ago, and similar type of thing, trying to garden, trying to grow our own food, realize it was impossible without animal inputs, essentially.
It's impossible. And people will send me video after video. And if it was so easy, the agenda wants us to move away from animal products so badly. Believe me, we'd be growing. There'd be thousands of veganic farms if it was really. I set out, you got to get the perspective I came from. I set out to prove that I could grow. I could have a farm where no animals ever died except for of old age. I wasn't dumb enough to think, no, I don't want to say dumb enough. I wasn't naive enough to think you could successfully grow vegetables without animal inputs, because I grew up on a farm, right? But we were apple orchards, but we had cows. We housed cows for the neighbors, like all the calves. There was always animal inputs. So I never thought in my wildest dreams that I could do it without animal inputs, but I thought I could do it without death and suffering. And I realized that nature is death and suffering all the time. It's constantly eating itself. Every moment of every day, we are eating. Life and death is happening. And if you eat a plate with a steak on it, or you eat a plate with broccoli on it, things died, sentient beings died for that plate of food. And so you can't feel that your plate with just broccoli on it is somehow less suffering. It's a lie. It's an illusion that's very disconnected from nature. It's very disconnected. And yes, the other thing is I was raising children, breastfeeding my children, having a cow, and then feeding oat milk from Costco to my son. And I'm like, why is my breast milk perfect and that cow's milk is going to cause cancer? That's like this craziest thing I ever heard. My logical mind just started. Once you get connected to nature, you touch the soil things, your logical mind is activated. You cannot be propagandized to think something different.
So you were raised in a vegan vegetarian home, grew up with that maybe ideology or belief system or your way of eating, go on to college, and then you open the vegan ice cream shop, which is pretty neat, obviously pretty niche because there's only so many vegans and most people eat ice cream, although it's still not a main thing.
Yeah, it was only vegans and acidic Jews, because acidic Jews don't eat dairy with meat. And so they could get it there's a big holiday, they'd come and buy. And so that was like, that's the whole market. There's nobody else. So it definitely wasn't a big enough market. And it was raw. So there was no seed oils, no fillers, it was all made from nuts. And I made all the nut milk myself. So it was like crazy labor intensive. I don't think it was necessarily a bad product. I don't think we should eat that much nuts, but it just wasn't a profitable product for sure.
Sure. So going on to was it Sage Vegan Bistro that you opened, which was very popular. How was that? You were obviously, I assume a lot of vegans were very happy with you because you're providing them, I assume, pretty good food, and it was pretty popular. Were you treated very nicely in the vegan community at that point?
Yeah. So I never didn't not serve honey. So there was this like sect of vegans that were angry with me and always trolling me because I believed that honey was the best form of sugar if you're going to eat sugar, and that I believe that every vegetable is pollinated by bees. And if we don't support beekeepers, we can't possibly expect to have vegan food. And so I always served honey in our restaurants. I always made beer with honey in my brewery. And this angered vegans. And so there was one very militant sect of vegans that was angry with me, but mostly I was revered in the vegan community. I never ate meat in my whole life. And I'm going to do this farm, I'm going to rescue animals, and I'm going to sequester carbon. And yeah, to the point where we would talk about in our house as our views started to shift. Not our views. My husband's indigenous from Mexico and was raised hunting like a honey badger and eating it, and hope your dogs don't die when you go get dinner because there's nothing else to eat. So my husband is he always just was like, this vegan thing, honey, is so much privilege. You can't even, the idea that you would only eat plants, or you'd only eat meat, or can only happen in a first world country. I ate turtle eggs, I ate fish, I ate jellyfish, whatever there was, we ate it because there was nothing else. And so he just always was like, if this is what these weirdos want, I'm happy to provide. But it wasn't, my husband never was in the ideology at all, even a little bit. Because he comes from
the hunting thing is just bizarre to me. It's just like, but I guess you could say extend the same thing to saying, look, I'm using bone meal and blood and all these other things to produce the product. But if I serve that, somehow it now becomes a problem, even though it's being used anyway for the food.
But people don't know that. People don't even want, if you even talk about it, they will say, the majority of crop death is done to feed cows. And then I say, okay, but if a grass-fed, grass-finished cow did not eat any food that caused crop death, explain to me how that's better than it's just like blinders on. They don't want to know about, and there's this whole thing in the vegan community, they make all this propaganda videos about intentional death versus unintentional death.
Mm-hmm.
But if I take a plow to the field, I know I'm causing death. I don't think it's unintentional. It's not the purpose of me plowing the field, but I'm aware it's not unintentional. It's not like I'm not trying to kill. No, I'm not trying to kill them, but the moles or the rabbits or whatever's in the field. But I know I am.
And even beyond that, with pesticide usage, which is the majority of plant agriculture, whether it's that clearly is done with the intent to kill. Pesticides in the name, literally cidal means to kill something. So
herbicide, pesticide, that means
fungus,
fungicide.
All the different things are out there that are utilized that actually do kill many animals. In fact, there's something like 4 quadrillion insects killed every year due to pesticide use in the U.S., which is a large number. And the insect deaths have knock-on effects for the things that eat the insects. And so then you end up with bird extinctions and other insect extinctions. Yeah. So it goes on and on.
Field of kale, no life pops up out of that. But if we moved the cows this morning and I walk through the paddock of the pasture, birds and rabbits and all types of life, insects and all types of life are going in front of me as we're putting the fencing out. So there's so much life. In a field of kale, there is no life.
Yeah. Well, it won't grow. It can't. And then any animals that come in and eat on that are often killed anyway. The farmers often hire people to cull those animals so that they don't eat their crops. I know that happens all over the world. So clearly it's, every creature's purpose ultimately is to be food for something else or fuel. When I die, something's going to eat me, whether it's worms, bugs, microorganisms. We all get eaten at some point. And I guess maybe the ideology is you shouldn't raise these slaves. The animals are slaves and keep them against their will. And growing up on a farm, obviously you were out there hitting cows with a hammer a few times a day and kicking them and all. This is what I see being posted all the time. And I've known many ranches. I've gone on many ranches. I've never seen anything like that. It's not to say that it doesn't occasionally happen.
I've never hit a cow with a hammer.
Well, but there's people like that. Show some footage from somebody slaughtering a cow in some third world country, and so that becomes the polarizing radical theme for them, and they don't realize what actually it means to raise food. And most ranchers, as I'm sure you are as well, are very concerned about the welfare of their animals. And animal welfare and animal rights are very different things.
It's really, we have a baby pig in the house right now. It's a male pig that we're bottle feeding it every 2 hours. The mother stepped on it and I thought it was going to die. I just was picking it up out of the mud to let it die warm and not seizing in the mud. And it was little, and the nature mom didn't want that pig. It was too little. She had 14 babies and that one was not going to make it in her mind. So she tried to stomp it out, and now we're bottle feeding it, and it's a male pig. Like, what will happen with that pig one day is that it will be food for my family or somebody else's family. But do you think I don't love it? My kids don't love it. They have a name for it, but that is like part of it. On Christmas Day, a rancher dropped off an abandoned steer or bull calf to our house that we have been bottle feeding. And then I got one of my milk dairy cows to take her on. We love that cow. We love all of our cows. In fact, I think I'm profoundly related to what it is to love something and then know that it's going to die in a more sensible way than just like nothing can ever die, which I understand because I came to it with that view. but it's
Yeah,
not a
well,
logical view. It
yeah,
does
I know
oscillate.
there are a lot of films, and if you got organizations like PETA putting out all this sort of what I would say is clearly propaganda based on emotion. And a lot of people are susceptible to that, particularly if I'm being honest. I think more so often young women tend to fall into veganism more so than any other demographic.
It's crazy how many men are attacking me right now. Like the intense attacks towards me right now are
mm,
young men that probably got fed soy formula. I don't know, but they're between the ages of 22 and 32. The consolidated efforts. They went and got my restaurants to say permanently closed on Google and Yelp and Apple Maps because that's crowdsourced information. So if they keep putting there's something wrong with this listing, permanently closed, permanently closed. Do you know what that does to my business when for multiple days and that I'm trying to say, we're not closed. Like here's, I got to do a video and show them and we're in the restaurant and show the newspaper and like crazy. But it is strangely, I thought what you're just saying is true, that it would be young women that would be angry with me but it seems that the irrational, men that are really angry at me, that are just like, just attack. I would hope your kids die, like all this. It's men. And I did not expect that, to be honest.
yeah, I don't doubt that the men are behaving worse, but I'm just saying as a general demographic, the whole women outnumber men quite a bit in the whole vegan space. And maybe you saw that in the number of customers in your restaurant. Maybe not, but.
Oh, no, I have 70% women to men.
Yeah. So that
That's why
and
I was
some of the men
surprised.
I'm not sure what would drive a man to want to be vegan, anyone, to be honest, but that's just me. So you're humming along, restaurants doing well for a number of years, a decade plus, something like that. What was the point where you decided, hey, I have a different direction I want to go in? When did that decision come in?
So the truth is, people think I did this decision now for money. And the truth is, I stayed vegan for money, if we're going to be really honest. In 2019, I was in a contract for $25 million to sell all my stores and stay on for 5 years and expand it across the country. And because of COVID, we're going through all the due diligence, and then the holidays came, Christmas came, January comes, and all of a sudden there's a ship off the coast and restaurants get closed down March and the deal falls apart. And so I miss out. I worked very hard for whether you agree with the business or not. I worked very hard for a lot of years to build wealth for my family. And that was my opportunity to get rid of it. And I thought, I'll just open a regenerative restaurant after I'll have the money. And this is where my passion lies. But it doesn't make sense for me to mess that up. And then it was COVID, and we're just trying to like hold on to whatever customers that we have. And the regulations were just insane. Open, closed, no indoor, outdoor, mask standing up but not sitting down, no outdoor dining anymore. And you're spending money to get your patio done. And then they're like, no more outdoor dining. So it was like pivot, sell toilet paper, sell this. So I didn't know that was the best time to try to explain this new concept. And I also didn't think that this high quality meat doesn't travel as well as a to-go food. And if you're only selling to-go food, it's not going to be a great example. And so I thought, and we'll do it after COVID. But then after COVID was like, and so I closed 2 stores during COVID because I just couldn't make payroll. Went from $7 million a year in my best store and $5 million in my worst store to can't even make payroll, bleeding money, trying to shore it up. And there's just the regulations and everything just making it worse and worse. And so I was looking at closing my last 2 stores. And earlier this year in January, and I had already moved full time to my ranch in Texas. And it seemed like the natural thing to do is just close it. And my brother is the founder of an organization called Kiss the Ground, which promotes regenerative agriculture. I'm now dedicated my life to regenerative agriculture and cattle farming, and we also have a pork program. But I thought we should at least try this. If I don't try this, it's not honest to who I am in the world. And I'm just letting this vegan concept die. And I didn't even try to do this other thing. And so we decided on Earth Day, we'd make the announcement. We thought that was the best day. And because there's this narrative that meat is bad for the environment, and it's a lie. your solar panels are not going to save us and our cow is not going to kill us. It's not happening. I decided to make the announcement on Earth Day and say, this is what I actually believe is best for animals, humanity, and all of it. And then we did the transition, and it's been really hard. And I thought, oh, we'll lose a percentage and we'll gain a percentage. But we lost a huge percentage. And we polled our guests before knowing that, okay, what percentage? And it was only 20% identified as vegan or vegetarian. So I thought, okay, I'm going to lose those 20% and I got to gain 20% of meat eaters. But ultimately, I had to gain more than 20% because the restaurants were not pulling enough butts in seats. And it'd been 13 years, and restaurants do need to reinvent themselves every so often. They're not just going to keep going. And so we decided to pull the trigger and do this. And I vetted all the farms. I went to the farms. I created the supply chains. There was no supply chains. I had to get storage and I had to get trucking and all this stuff to get everything directly from the farms. And our commitment is that every bit of meat and dairy in the restaurant comes from a regenerative farm. All the grains and vegetables are either certified organic or certified regenerative. And that is hard because not all those supply chains are in place.
Yeah, I took a look at your menu a while back, and I saw that there were still vegan items on the restaurant. So if you still wanted a vegan item, you can go there. And I'm sure, I suppose it tasted good. When you personally came to the realization that, hey, maybe veganism isn't the answer to all society's ills, as vegans will say. They talk about a vegan planet, how beautiful it would be. And I think it'd be mass chaos.
Everything will die. Everything will die. Yeah. I think that it's totally valid for people to eat whatever they want, but to think that we're all going to stop eating meat, the collapse of death that would ensue from that, people have no idea.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of cannibalism going on, unfortunately. I think is what would happen. And all the wild animals would get consumed very rapidly. So you had this realized that, hey, financially doesn't make sense for me to shift to regenerative agriculture, put me meat on the menu. Did you personally start consuming animal products at some point?
I eat eggs and dairy from my own chickens, but out in the world, I don't really, at my own restaurant as well. But if I don't know where stuff is coming from, I'm still committed to, So if it's like my dad's farm or somewhere I really know what's going on, Origins meat, Origins dairy, and I haven't eaten meat yet. My husband's pressuring to no end. And I had 4 kids in my 40s. I haven't had much health issues, but I have been breastfeeding for 10 years right now because I had a kid every 2 years and breastfed for 2 years, and been pregnant for more time than that, obviously. So I just feel that it might be a good idea, but I don't know. I've never eaten meat. And so it's a mental fuck. Like I gotta figure out how I can be okay with it. And literally you got to get, at the beginning of our marriage, I built an outdoor kitchen for my husband, and he had all commercial stove and everything so he could have his own meat kitchen. And now it's, if my husband cooks dinner, I look and I'm like, is there anything for me to eat? And there's butternut squash fried in tallow. I'm like, thanks, honey. I appreciate that. So my husband's like over it. He feels like he put in his time and he did his time. And during my pregnancies, I did take liver pills and fish oil because I had this thought. I think after my first child, I might not have done that with my first child. I thought, what if I'm wrong, right? What if this ideology is wrong? And my dad had already had the realization, and he was already having a dairy farm, and he ate a hamburger, and the Huffington Post and CNN went crazy. And he was just pressuring me, like, you got to drink bone broth, something, you can't. So I started taking liver and fish oil with my pregnancies because I was like, what if my ideology is wrong? I'm fucking up my kid's brain. And my dad's also, you're old and your body's old, so you got to be supplementing or whatever. And so I did do that, and I ate yogurt and stuff like that. But I'm on the process. I just never have eaten meat. It doesn't even I don't even, and this is going to sound crazy to your audience because I'm like the opposite of them. It just doesn't even look like food to me because I've never eaten it. But all my kids now eat meat. I guess one daughter doesn't. She eats little bits with her father forces her to, but not like choosing. But they've all seen animals be processed. They grew up with the whole thing. And they're totally okay with it. Yesterday, a goat ate a plastic bag and my husband had to harvest him on emergency because his stomach blew up and we couldn't save him. And so he was like, I'm going to cut him open and see what's going on. If he's still good, then I'm going to harvest him. The kids saw that and they were like, Billy Goat shouldn't have eaten that plastic bag. And I'm like, yeah, Billy Goat shouldn't have eaten that plastic bag. And then my son's, but goat is delicious. And it's the goat is hanging upside down with the skin half off. And I'm, oh, poor Willy Goat. And so my kids have a much more healthy relationship than I do to death and meat. And I'm having to recreate my relationship with both death and meat because of I'm 46 years old. It's like a big change.
So never having meat, vegetarian, so you have dairy, eggs, and things like that currently, but never having tasted meat, but yet selling it in your restaurant. How do you know how to make it? Were you cooking it? How do you know it's cooked well and done well? And
my husband's my co-executive chef the whole time we've always had the restaurant.
So he's cooking the meat.
And he's sneaky. Like he'll be like, you need to taste the bolognese. Just don't eat the meat. Go tell me what needs to be. Or his newest thing is, I'm making a batch of bone broth for the farm store. And no, I just can't make it taste as good as you could. Can you go taste it? So I am really good at seasoning. And so I have tasted and I make all the sauces and all of that. But the actual meat cooking is my husband. And he has tons of experience of both butchering animals, raising animals, and cooking meat. And before he worked for me, and now we're partners now, but years ago, he worked for me and that's how we got married. He worked in lots of other kinds of restaurants and learned a lot about cooking meat. And we have a restaurant here on the farm in Texas. Like you can do retreats here or you can come just eat at the restaurant or whatever. And he does all the meat stuff and I do all the sauces and all the sides and everything like that. And I do a lot of the marinades that then he puts meat in and I do rubs and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about if you still do that stuff in Texas, because Texas might be a different environment than LA might be. But let me ask you about when you made the decision, the announcement that, hey, we are no longer strictly a vegan restaurant. We are now a Sage Regenerative restaurant or something along those lines back. I think it was 6 months ago or so. I can't remember the exact time frame. You can tell me that. What happened with that announcement?
April 22nd, we made the announcement and we told the vegan community that out of respect, we were going to give them 30 days to come enjoy their favorite dishes, blah, blah, blah. And that on the 1st of whatever, the 22nd of May or whatever, we would have the new menu. Looking back, that was a mistake because we got a lot of press and then there was no way for people to support us. But I thought I was there. It didn't matter what I was going to do. The vegans were going to feel like I disrespected them, that I had made money off them, and then I didn't follow through. And that I was a fraud and blah, blah, blah. But the first thing that happened is people got very angry. And at first, the conventional press was pretty supportive. And the LA Times or Bon Appetit magazine and the news and everywhere, Good Morning America, like Yahoo News, it was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. And mostly the regular world was very supportive. And the vegans were they would put the girl, Courtney Swan from the Real Foodology, put up a reel with me and her in front of the restaurant. I think you repurposed it for one of your eating steaks with watchings and 10,000 comments of just die, slit your throat, bullet to the head. And then they started protesting in front of the restaurants multiple days, wearing So I believe, and this might, if people are going to say you're totally conspiracy minded, I think that there's some funding supporting the pushback for my restaurant. I don't know who it is. I don't know. But these protesters had body cameras on them. They had printed signs that cost money, not like printed on your printer at home, but like professionally printed signs. They had a coordinator that was there. Like she kept coming and bringing water and checking in, and that person didn't know who I was. So they walked up and she was like, I'm here to support. Do you need water? Do you need anything? We have a car down the street. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. I own the restaurant. I have plenty of water inside. And then she was like, oh, but they had support. And so I do think there was some kind of coordinated effort. It was always Friday nights, Saturday nights, Father's Day, big money days that they were keeping the people out of my restaurant. And it just kept going. And then that turned into the campaign to get it. I don't know how they did that. I didn't see anybody asking anybody, but they got a bunch of people to say we were permanently closed on multiple platforms. And I think there was a lot of people, early days, vegans, that were supporting me and saying she still has a bunch, 50% vegan. Most of the dishes are still there and you can just add meat to them. And people were feeling defensive. But then I heard from some vegan influencers that there was pressure to not support me, to not. And I don't know why. I don't know why they chose that, but there's been very little support from customers. And there's a woman that's a dog rescue. I've given her raw milk many times to feed puppy litters that she needed to feed. And then she's posting milk is for baby cows, not for humans. And I'm like, what about for your puppies? You've been coming to get goat milk or cow milk for me for years in California. And she's like, you didn't believe in killing animals then, and now you do. So you're the enemy. You're a murderer. And it's just, it's shocking to me. This is a person I know in real life. I've adopted 3 dogs from her. I've donated dog food. Like, she's called me like, I have an emergency. There's a pit bull in LA in an apartment building and they're going to take it to the pound. Can you go get it? Like, I've totally helped her many times. And for her to be doing that seems crazy to me. Does she treat every person on the street that eats meat that way?
Yeah, for the record, I am supportive of people eating whatever diet they want, whether it's a carnivore diet, a vegan diet, a Mediterranean diet, a vegetarian. I don't really care. I mean, I think people should have the choice and the freedom to do what they want. And the fact that you would be harassed to the point where, I don't know if you felt like you were ever in any danger. Was there ever a point where you felt like this could be violent or something like that? Was that ever, you get the online threats, people telling you to die and we hope you're dead. I've had that come to me as well. I don't really take that too seriously, but was there any
one guy with a body cam and a mask that was like a dead, like a skeleton mask, and a camera was following me in Echo Park, and he was part of the protester group, and I asked him to stop following me and he said no right to privacy or blah, blah, blah. And he was following me and I did go back inside and ask a man to come with me. I had to put money on the meter for our refrigerator truck that was up the street. And so I was like, and he was just following me. And then once the man came out with me and was walking, he followed farther behind, but he was like in my face with the camera, in the face of customers on the street, and really angry. And he was trying to get someone to fight him. And so because of that, it was scary because he wanted it. And my husband was on the way to the restaurant, but he was at the Pasadena restaurant and I was at the LA restaurant. And I said, honey, don't come here, because that guy was trying to get any man to punch him so he could call the police and file charges against us. And he was like up in people's face with the camera and and it's funny, my COO, a British gay guy, very proper, and he was like, get out of here with your toxic masculinity. And I was laughing. I don't know. It's like the last thing that you would describe this man as, a toxic masculinity. But he was just in his face, trying to get, and then finally, he did call the police because there's a security guard at the farmer's market hired by the city of LA to keep the farmer's market safe. And he came over to see what was happening. And then he went into the restaurant to get a cup of water. And when he came out, the door hit that guy because the guy was standing right at the door. And he called the police and tried to file charges against this guy and said that he was an employee of mine, which he wasn't, and that he was assaulted. And he called an ambulance because he said he had a splinter But imagine the gross misuse of resources that you would call the police and an ambulance for a splinter in your finger.
Yeah. Was there, when because I see the people, they were like in your restaurant with bullhorns screaming at customers, getting inside. Do you not have any recourse to get them out of there? Can't you just say, hey, can the cops tell them, hey, this is not cool? Or is there can you trespass
totally illegal
them or
for them to
like
be
that?
inside the restaurant and doing that. But it's Los Angeles. Have you ever been there? It's just, the police don't show up. And so that's part of the issue with doing business in California. On Mother's Day last year, a man got fully naked, pulled out his junk and was screaming, you want to F me, and throwing his dirty clothes everywhere. And we called the police multiple times, and 3 hours later they sent a social worker to help with the upset, unhoused person. But forget that I lost my whole Mother's Day brunch, blah, blah, blah. No, we called the police. 7 customers called the police. I called the police. And then a week later, after Fox News, I was on Fox National and Local and Fox Business. And when that happened, they sent somebody out to give us a cell phone number. Oh, if it happens again. But that was like too little too late. When the cops came, they didn't come. They just drove past, put their sirens on for a second, slowed down, and then drove away as if that was going to scare them out of the space. But it did not. They just ran outside for a second and then ran back in. But what's the cost to my business to lose an entire Father's Day? If it's like a $16,000 on a regular Sunday, Father's Day could be $22,000 to $27,000, and they chase all the customers out. It's a huge impact to the business.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally get that. The status of the restaurants, you said right now they're still open. They're not closed, but they're struggling a little bit due to, I guess, post-COVID and some of this vegan nonsense that's going on.
We're in a transition wave where I need to gain more meat eating customers, and I have to ride this wave out. And post COVID, we were already struggling. And the goal was we needed to expand our audience to get more butts in seats. And this was already the life that I was living. It's not, people are like, oh, you're a sellout for money. No, I literally move like cows every day. This is what I think is the best thing for us to be doing.
And where are the locations that are open currently in LA?
Echo Park on Sunset Boulevard, close to downtown, between Silver Lake and downtown. And then in Pasadena in the One Colorado building between Union and Colorado.
And just to reiterate, the meat you have is all raised from regenerative sources, or is that how you do that?
Yes. So everything or wild harvested. There's wild harvested game as well. We have a venison patty melt and we have antelope curry, and those are field harvested with a USDA inspector. And then we have the bison from Force of Nature that comes from Montana. And then we have beef from the Stemple Creek in California. And then all of our dairy is A2A2 raw dairy from Origins. And our eggs are coming from Happy Hens in San Diego, which is fully outdoor all the time. And we don't have bacon currently because I haven't found a source that I'm fully aligned with. But since I've said that on a couple podcasts, some farmers have reached out to me. So we're working on getting that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know there's a couple hog farmers that do things the right way that I've met over time. So you're in Texas now. You've got a ranch. Are you getting any harassment in Texas? Are vegans seeking you out in Texas and coming to your restaurant and protesting your farm at all? Or are they staying away from there?
No. And I honestly was a little worried about that because you could just book on Airbnb, right? This is a house I'm in right now because I'm away from our kids. So it's quiet. This is a rental house. So we have these rental houses on the ranch. And I was a little worried, is someone going to come up and then try to take, so I have a cow in a pen that has pink eye and it's getting treated. Are they going to zoom in on the pink eye and say, she's abusing her animals? I did think about that, but it would be a big effort. They'd have to come out here. So we haven't had that happen, but the people in Texas they don't even know, like when I try to explain it to them, where my neighbors saw me on Fox News, they can't even comprehend what is a vegan restaurant. They didn't even think that was a thing, right? So they're just like, they can't wrap their head around what's happening and how bad that it's impacting my cash flow and all of that. It's hard for them to see. But the restaurant here in Texas is on the ranch. It's only open right now on the weekends, and it's all farm to table. So it's either goat or sheep or cow or pig from the ranch, and it's different every week. If you come, you should call ahead if you only eat steak, so we make sure that's on the menu, because it could be just beardy, it could be a goat week, it could be my husband does, and then we grow a lot of vegetables too, so we always have we had eggplant parmesan, or we have different kinds of things that are from the vegetables, cucumber salad as a side, and different kinds of. Those are both fruits. I know. Someone's going to say, oh,
do you mind sharing what part of Texas you're in? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'm in Bandera, the cowboy capital of the world.
Oh, okay.
Outside of San Antonio.
Yeah, I was going to say that's so. I guess conceivably, if you felt like it, maybe if you transition away from LA, you could maybe open something in San Antonio, which would probably be, I don't know if that's maybe on the plans or something like that. Are you thinking about the future for this sort of stuff? Because you are obviously a very accomplished chef. And is that something you ever think about?
We're putting a brewery here on the ranch, and my goal would be more that we could get this restaurant open, like have a destination brewery and restaurant and hospitality, and have it be an all-inclusive. We're still raising the money to finish the brewery, but we have the event space and we have the restaurant, we have the rental units. To be honest, and this is not a popular opinion, I set out to have all these restaurants and all this work when I didn't have any children, and I could have gone through my whole life and not had children. I was 37 when I had my first child, but I have 5 children, and I don't want to spend 12, 15 hours a day away from them. And I was sold a bill of goods that you could be a good mom and be a good businesswoman. And I would say that you could be okay at both, but you can't be good at both. And so in my attempt to be okay at both, I'd like to have it more centered around what we're doing here on the farm so my children can be around me. And I know it's an unpopular view, but
it's to be a restaurant. No, I know it's an unpopular view. I think it's probably a lot to do with the reality. And there's a lot of, we're in this crazy political time right now where you see a lot of alignments. Even with diet seems to have become more and more political. Unfortunately, I think every human should have the knowledge to have a good, healthy diet. And when you tribalize it or politicize it, unfortunately, I think it harms a lot of people. And I think that's something to see, that a lot of people have a sort of maybe a dietary epiphany, and they say, hey, wait a minute. And then they start seeing other things differently. I don't know do you feel any sort of relevance to that?
I think my epiphany, my mom was and never vaccinated me. And you're a doctor, so you may not agree with this, but she never vaccinated me as a child. And so when everybody just jumped on the COVID vaccine that came out so quick, I was just shocked. Like, I always thought the anti-vax thing was like a hippie, like a liberal hippie white woman thing, to be totally like transparent. And that actually, I would say that that might have helped me transition my ideas around the environment, around regenerative agriculture. I mean, regenerative agriculture, I had already bought in. My brother had started Kiss the Ground 10 years ago, but like I still thought there was a way that I could prove we could do regenerative agriculture without animals dying. I know, I was silly. But so that was really, for me, is this idea that everybody in my life turned on me because of something that didn't change. It wasn't like I changed. I was never vaccinated. I didn't vaccinate my children. I had home births. And so all of a sudden I was bad and wrong for something that people have been friends with me since 5th grade stopped talking to me. And so I think that was more where I started to see the tribal thing. And I did start to realize that the veganism, and I had already been like sold on the regenerative agriculture and that my husband could eat meat in the house and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't think that veganism was part of the psyop. And I think that seeing the tribal behavior around the vaccine started to have me see tribal behavior around lots of different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I was very disappointed in the COVID, how that was managed as a physician. I thought we really lost a lot, and there's been a lot of trust lost within the healthcare industry in general. In a way, I think it's for good reason. I think there's some problems with it. But let me ask you about when you were more ideologically aligned with veganism. Let me ask you about this stuff. There was a period of time where veganism, 1940s, when veganism was that word was first coined, some guy from England, I can't remember the guy who started it. The movement was probably more, I think, based on, maybe I'm misguided, but at least I'm trying to do the right thing. And then the corporations started to co-opt this. And then we started to see the rise of Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, and these types of things. What did you think about those products coming out?
Never eaten any of them, never served them in my restaurant, never, ever. I've been a hard no on I did surrender to a little bit of the vegan cheese, like fake cheese on the pizzas in the restaurant, because I tried to do the pizzas like as just flatbreads with olive oil and garlic and not long fermented sourdough. And that's how they are now, the vegan options in my restaurant, because we have no seed oils whatsoever. But I didn't serve any of those things in my restaurant. Never Just Egg. I've never eaten an Impossible Burger. I've never eaten a Beyond Meat. I've never eaten a chicken nugget type food. I don't eat ultra processed foods. So even though I've been vegan or vegetarian my whole life, my mom didn't let us have soda or even juice really. We ate whole foods, and we were very poor, but my mom worked at a bakery so she could bring home organic grain from the bakery that had bugs or whatever, and she'd put it in the freezer and sift out the bugs. And her identical twin sister worked at the co-op, and so she was able to get bulk pricing or get broken bags of beans or whatever. So my parents were very committed to serving us whole foods with no chemicals. And so I never ate any of those things. They were never part of my diet. And I always understood that the longer the ingredient list, the worse it was. And my mom used to say, if you can't remember it in grandma's garden or seeing it growing somewhere on the side of the road, then it's not something that you should eat. Meaning like you shouldn't, if you don't know the name, you shouldn't eat it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in general pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of pushback these days. And a lot of people are out there defending these ultra-processed foods, saying everything in moderation, and there's no real evidence that shows they're harmful. But intuitively, you're just like, this doesn't make sense to me as a human. No humans have ever eaten this stuff until very recently, maybe in the last 100 years or 50 years or 10 years in some cases.
But I think there is evidence. I think there is evidence.
No, I agree there is evidence, but I mean, people will defend. They'll say, look at the randomized controlled trial meta-analysis overall thing, and they'll say that the preponderance of the same thing they do with a lot of things. They'll look at whoever funds the most studies gets to dominate the preponderance of evidence. And so if you've got these food companies doing all these studies, or these drug companies doing all these studies and funding that, then sure, the preponderance of evidence is going to be whoever has the most money to spend on studies. So it gets to the same thing.
If you look at a list of the companies that are owned by Monsanto, or you see the connection between the drug companies and the ag companies, you realize that the conglomerate has no interest in us knowing the truth about how these foods are affecting us. And you get these studies saying that regenerative agriculture is not working, looking from a very narrow view to get there, that point. And people send me these studies all the time, and I'm like, yeah, it's bollocks. You're just showing me something it's like a black box view where you're just giving this much and you're not looking at the rest of the information. But who's funding regenerative agriculture studies? There's no money. There's no windmills to sell. There's no Teslas to sell. There's no way to get rich at the end of the day. And so there's going to always be more money out there trying to disprove regenerative agriculture. But anybody that's in it and doing it can see beyond a shadow of a doubt how well it's working. And even if it's not sequestering carbon, who cares? It's healthier meat. There's evidence, like irrefutable evidence, that the meat is healthier on a grass-fed, pastured with multi-species, blah, 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 blah. And there's unrefutable evidence that the soil is healthier, and then the humans are by extension healthier. So I think it's a crazy thing to just like argue over how long the carbon can be sequestered. It's a dumb argument. But they're like, even NPR did a hit piece basically saying that I was telling a lie. Regenerative agriculture is not better for the environment, and the best thing you can do is just stop eating meat a couple of days a week. That doesn't even make any sense. Sure, okay, if that's what you think, if that's an honest thought, then you should still eat regenerative or grass-fed, grass-finished, or whatever meat on these other days. It's a dishonest approach that they're taking.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I've been talking about the fact that meat is not destroying the environment. And like I said, as far as you can point to agriculture in general, and you look at this, the vast majority of our food is produced in a monocrop agricultural system, at least in Western society. And that is clearly destructive, and things that utilize that are not helping the environment. So the less we have to depend on that, probably the better for, like I said, it's not going to change overnight, but if you can incrementally change that. And then in order to change things, I think we have to support, I tell people, you get to vote every day with what you decide to buy. That's a vote.
That's what I say every day. People say, what can I do? And I say, you have to support the farmers doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So do you, as far as you're out there in sort of near Central Texas, out there in San Antonio, are you getting, obviously you had a lot of vegan death threat hatred. Are you getting any positive, like, we support what you're doing type of thing? Is that coming your way a little bit?
It is coming. And I've been on a bunch of podcasts as far as that are meat focused podcast. And there's a lot of people. And I think for a while, Fox News was like really promoting, but really they just wanted me to say how bad it was in California. And so if I wouldn't just stick to that script, like that wasn't going to go. It is bad in California, but that's not like the only thing that I have to say. And yes, we're getting some support. There's a documentary about regenerative agriculture that just came and shot on the farm recently. And I think that a doctor just booked a whole office retreat here at the ranch, and they're booking out all the houses, and they're going to do a week with their whole staff to team building, whatever. And we're definitely getting people that are hearing about my story and wanting to support and figuring ways to work the ranch into, oh, I'm going to come out for a summer vacation, or we're going to do a family reunion. And so we are getting some support in that way. And we just ran some ads in LA, and I just got the data back. And it's really interesting because, like you were saying, 70% of my following now are women between the ages of 30 and 50 or something like that, right? And of the ad that we just ran in the LA area, it was men, 70%, that are focused on health, fitness, conscious masculinity, or carnivore diet, were the people that clicked the ad and watched it till the end. So that's interesting data, is that it is women driving the vegan diet and it is men driving the more carnivore diet. And I hope that I can be somewhere in the middle and really, and that's what some people have written me emails and just like that. Me and my husband haven't eaten at the same restaurant in so long. He's only eats meat every meal, and I only want to eat whole foods, and I don't want to eat this and that and this. And we eat separately. And now we've been going 3 nights a week as a date night. So I've gotten some nice emails like that where it's a split family and the 2 people eat differently, but they both have a high quality commitment.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing in general is a general maybe downward level of interest in veganism as a whole worldwide. The number peaked a few years ago, probably with the hype from Beyond Meat when they were pushing all that money and using that corporate synthetic manufactured enthusiasm. And now it's starting to wane. And interest in meat-based diets, animal-based diets are starting to drive up significantly, because veganism is only ever, at its best, ever affected 1% to 3% of the population at any time. And it historically has never gotten above that, despite literally billions and billions of dollars in advertising, some of it coming now from Silicon Valley, trying to push these alternative meat products. And despite that, people just aren't interested. And now more and more people are turning to, hey, we're tired of being poisoned by this processed food garbage. There's restaurants that are like shunning seed oils like yours does and shunning all the ultra processed food. Do you see that? Do you see that? Do you see it? Do you see can you see the trends changing in real time, or is it just because I'll do
I can see the trends changing in real time. And a lot of the people that used to be super ultra conscious, raw, vegan, blah, 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 like the spiritual, what I would call like the spiritual, like vegan community in Los Angeles, shifted to meat over COVID, like hardcore. It was like a hardcore, but a lot of them also left California. And so that doesn't help my business. But I was just talking about this on another podcast. This woman was saying she used to eat at my restaurant all the time, and now she eats meat and tallow and blah, blah, blah. And she feels so much better. And then she was like, afterwards, did you know so-and-so is? And did you know so-and-so is? So yeah, I think it is definitely in real time. And I had a woman come into the restaurant, tears in her eyes, said, I've been feeling so unhealthy. I didn't want to tell my family after I made my whole family go vegan. I didn't want to tell them. And when you put out your announcement, I literally used that announcement. I connected it to the TV and had my whole family watch the announcement. And then we watched the Kiss the Ground film. And I explained that why we're changing. And one of my kids is still vegan, but everybody else is on board with the change. And she was like, just thank you. I was thinking about it in the nighttime when I'm half awake, half asleep. I'm thinking about it. And then you did this and it gave me the strength. And so there is people that are saying those things, and I'm watching in real time people saying, thank you so much for educating me. I didn't even know the difference between what is grass fed, what is grass finished, what does these things mean, what is grain finished, what is supplemental grain. Like, I've been doing a lot of just educating people on what these different things are. And I'm shocked how little people know about their own food, honestly, is what I'm realizing.
Well, I think the vast majority of people make food buying decisions based on taste and cost. And I think that's as far as it gets for probably the vast majority. Very few people think about how it impacts their health and other things. Mollie, we're about out of time. Can you, 2 restaurants in LA, Sage Bistro, right? What and then
it's Sage Vegan Kitchen now is the name.
Sage Vegan Kitchen in LA. And then what's the name of the place in Bandera, Texas?
It's Sovereignty Ranch.
Sovereignty Ranch.
We have a website for both. You guys can check them out or find me on Instagram. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for having me on.
Mollie, what's your Instagram handle, by the way?
I'm at Chef Mollie and at Sovereignty Ranch, and the restaurant is at The Kind Sage.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.